I really, really hate to say it, but you have to learn to deal with it. You have to learn to deal with it head on. Salam everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I'm Dr. Qaali Hussein, and this is Taking Up Space, a place where underdogs learn to defy the norm and set their own standards. And today we'll be talking about discrimination in the workplace. So what exactly is discrimination in the workplace? Discrimination is the unfair treatment of a person or groups of people based on race, gender, ethnicity, age, sexual orientation, religious practices. And so why is it important for us to learn about discrimination, identify discrimination, and learn to either deal with it or to maneuver around it? It's very important to know the types of discrimination that you're going to be facing and what can and cannot be done about it, both from a personal health perspective and from opportunity perspective. And so from a personal health perspective, an important thing that I think we hardly ever discuss or even acknowledge is the impact that persistent discrimination can have on you as a person, on your mental health and on your physical health. Discrimination is known to lead to stress, and chronic stress, if you're facing discrimination or you feel like you're facing discrimination constantly, chronic stress has its own health effects. So chronic stress can lead to a wide variety of physical and mental health problems, including anxiety, depression, obesity, high blood pressure, and substance abuse. So it has a real physical impact as well as a mental health effect. And it's not even the experience of discrimination, even the anticipation can lead to chronic stress. Just the idea that if I go into this field or if I go into this program, I may be discriminated against based on something that is an important characteristic of your persona. For me, it was always the hijab and being a practicing Muslim who wanted to pray at the workplace and who wanted to fast and who wanted to do all the things that I wanted to do as a Muslim. The idea that that would be a problem, that I could be discriminated against because of that, was always with me, whether it happened or not. Right? And even the anticipation of discrimination can lead to feelings of chronic stress. And so what usually happens is that anticipation of discrimination can lead people to avoid certain situations. If you're told that if you go into this field, you may be discriminated against because, there's a reason why there's a small minority of women in this field or of Black people in this field, or there's no Muslim women who wear a hijab in surgery. The idea that being in that field is going to cause you to be discriminated against can lead some people to avoid that, right? To miss out on educational and job opportunities. And so it has real implications on the workforce. There are many reasons for us to discuss discrimination, to figure out how to deal with it on a personal level, how to deal with it in the workplace, and find out if there are things that you can do about it to advocate for yourself. And sometimes when the situation is a bit too hostile and you're not able to get the support that you need or to rectify the situation in a way that does not involve retaliation towards you or cost you your own opportunities, how do you deal with it in a way that will not lead to chronic stress and will not lead to mental health problems for yourself? How do you learn to not internalize it yourself and deal with it in a way that says, okay, this is a function of the system, this is a flaw of the system, and I just need to maneuver around it and get to my end goal. So that's one of the reasons why I think it's very important for us to discuss discrimination in that context, because this is something that we've all experienced. Everybody who is a minority in many fields, not just in medicine, will tell you their horror stories of feeling discrimination in the workplace. So there are overt types where people just come straight out and say exactly what they feel. Overt racism. I've been called terrorist multiple times. I've been told when I was pregnant, I was no longer qualified to be a surgeon because now I'm a mother and my priorities are completely different. I can't be a surgeon. So there are times when the discrimination is completely explicit and overt. You don't have to think, okay, what exactly did they mean? But a majority of the discrimination that you will face in the workplace is implicit. It's implied discrimination. And it basically is examples of people pointing out that you don't belong. For example, when people ask you, "Now, where are you from?" We see this a lot in the Western world. And you say, "I was born here," or "I came here at a very young age, so I identify as, for example, as an American." People say, "No, really, where are you really from?" Basically making you like an other. You're not American, you're not from here. Or they say, "Oh, you speak English so well." They find ways to make you feel like you don't belong. Other ones that come up very often are like when I introduce myself as the surgeon, and they say, they do a double take and say, "Wait, you're the surgeon?" Basically belittling the fact that I, as a Muslim woman who obviously in a hijab, can be the surgeon, right? So these are called microaggressions. They're little slights. They're not completely out in the open, and someone who's not attuned to the different types of discrimination may not, and who hasn't probably experienced that level of discrimination themselves, or who doesn't face it every day, may not recognize it as a form of discrimination. But when it happens often enough, the people who feel it and who experience it definitely identify it. And so these are called microaggressions, or snubs and slights and misguided comments that are meant to make you feel like you don't belong or you haven't earned your position or your title. And you experience them often enough, they are as harmful as overt discrimination, right? If you're having to defend your position every single day, it adds up. And so it can be as harmful to your health as major forms of discrimination and bias. And so what this creates is a heightened sense of always being watchful. That heightened sense of watchfulness can lead to the experience of chronic stress. So what protections are there in the workplace for those who experience discrimination? So in the US, we have the Equal Opportunity Employment Commission, which is a large federal agency established via the 1964 Civil Rights Act to help administer and enforce civil rights laws against workplace discrimination. We also have the Age Discrimination in Employment Act, as well as the Americans with Disabilities Act. But in reality, despite all these protections, discrimination still exists. And this is why I wanted to talk about the truth about discrimination in the workplace, even with all the protections in place from a legal standpoint. The fact that there are laws against specific things. I'll give you a couple of examples. When you're in an interview, it's illegal for employers to ask you about your marital status or whether you're planning on having children or not as a woman. It's illegal for employers to ask you about your religion. There's a lot of discrimination when it comes to wearing the hijab in many fields. In medicine, I've experienced it myself where I was asked to take off my hijab. From a legal standpoint, it is absolutely illegal. But for someone who is looking for training or looking for a job, especially that early in your career, it becomes very difficult to go the route of legal recourse because a lot of these communities, a lot of these fields are very close-knit and everybody knows each other. So when you go that route and you speak up, it is possible for you to experience retaliation, which can take the form of being blackballed from your field. So that is the reality of discrimination in the workplace is, yes, there are protections in place from a legal standpoint, but the reality is that all those protections are violated, all those civil rights are violated very frequently, and speaking up and reporting all these experiences, even with the structures in place, even with a federal agency in place, is less helpful to the employee. Or if it's a student or someone early in their career, it becomes very difficult to prove a case or to even have it go your way because a lot of these companies, as you can probably guess, are well equipped with big law firms. And I have been told in the past when trying to advocate for a junior resident that someone that early in their career going up against these big corporations is similar to a goldfish going up against a shark. So this is the reality of discrimination in the workplace. Employees have rights, but those rights are violated very frequently. And the current protections that we have in place, our current avenues for recourse are not 100% without risk to the employee and very little risk to the companies, to the employers, and even when they do end up having to pay a fine, it's a small fraction of their worth. So this is exactly why I think it's important for us to discuss how to deal with it on a personal level, how to pick and choose battles, how to speak up against a certain form of discrimination that clearly violates your values, and how to go about it in a way that does not cause opportunities for you in your current situation and in future possible opportunities. So what options do we have in dealing with discrimination in the workplace, given all these facts? So number one is acknowledge the existence of discrimination. For the longest time, it irritated me that I was always discouraged from going into medicine, from going into surgery. But one thing that it did for me is it solidified for me the fact that I was going to get discriminated against. So when I experienced different forms of discrimination, whether it was sexism or Islamophobia or pure racism, I was mentally prepared because I knew I was going to face it. Right? So just the idea of knowing that you are going to face discrimination and being mentally prepared for it has helped me more than I think anything else. I didn't realize it until I was way late into my training and I started seeing a pattern over and over. And it finally hit me. I had family members who loved me and wanted the best for me, discouraging me from going into these fields because they didn't want me to experience this. And it finally clicked for me that their constant warning with the hijab and with having kids served me so well because it prepared me to be ready for that. So I think knowing that regardless of how great the interview is at the beginning or your experiences with different people are, knowing that you will face discrimination. You will face discrimination from different people at all levels. Everywhere you go, you will face discrimination based on whatever characteristic of yours that makes you a minority in that field. You will face discrimination no matter what. Once you know that you're going to face discrimination, the second thing to do is figure out how you're going to deal with it. Depending on who you experience it from, what level they're at, are you going to be in a position to respond, or are you going to be in a position to strategize and say, you know what, this is a senior person. They're going to grade me. They're going to observe me. They're going to be the ones responsible for my promotion in this workplace. And so I'm going to be strategic about it, right? They bring this up, I can find a way to ask questions to see exactly what they mean before I assume that they're discriminating against me, or I find a way to remove myself from the situation so that I don't create a problem for myself in the future, right? I really, really hate to say it, but the best way to deal with discrimination, especially if you're in a field that you absolutely love and want to progress in, is you have to learn to deal with it. You have to learn to deal with it head on. And there are times when you're going to be able to speak up and say, nope, this is inappropriate. I am not going to stand for it. And you can defend yourself and you're okay with whatever consequences come. And there are times when you're going to say, you know what, I'm going to bite my tongue. I'm going to learn to be strategic and not say anything. And I'm going to do it in a way that is not going to cost me opportunities, because that is how the game is played. Right? I really, really hate to say it, but if you want to succeed in that field, there are times that you're just going to have to bite your tongue and just put in the work, find a way to remove yourself from that situation. And the emotional aspect of it, I'm going to do an entirely different video because I think that is another very important topic to talk about, is emotionally unpacking all of that and dealing with it. But you're going to have to prepare for how to deal with this if you can't face it and say this is inappropriate, right? So I think mentally preparing for that ahead of time is very, very helpful. And once I started doing that, I could sense it. And as soon as I was able to figure out where the bias was coming from, it was much easier for me to deal with because I had already mentally run through this exercise. So once you've gone through this mental preparation of how to deal with it, my third advice would be to know that whatever the criticism is, whatever the discrimination is, know that it says a lot more about them than it does about you. Right? If they belittle your qualifications or the fact that you belong in that field or not, them having that bias says a lot more about them than it says about you. What we tend to do is we tend to internalize a lot of this feedback, and that's how it affects our mental health and well-being. So those are my 3 top tips for dealing with discrimination in the workplace. I hope you found this video helpful. Please leave comments below about your experiences in the workplace and how you've been able to deal with it, and share any any tips or tricks you might have as well, and any questions you have, and hopefully I can answer those in the next video, inshallah. Thank you for tuning in, and inshallah I'll see you in the next video. Salam.